Welcome to Build and Chilled, a series where I build cute playable Sims homes while telling not so cute, chilling stories. This is our second part of our Ted Bundy series, so if you haven't seen the first part, make sure you go back and watch that. It is on my channel, and I'll link it somewhere on the screen. Without further ado, let's crack back into it. On September 2nd, Bundy was driving down a main road in Idaho where he saw a young woman hitchhiking on the side of the road. He offered to bring her to a gas station. Upon entering his car, he bound her, raped her, and strangled her. The still unidentified hitchhiker was dismembered before Bundy disposed of her corpse in a nearby river. This is one of those that we're not exactly sure, because they found some remains of someone they couldn't identify,
But
but that
not
also
enough
could
to
have just been
be.
Bundy saying that he did it because he just wanted to boost his ego. And yeah, there was like so that one's like kind of up in the air on if that was actually him,
Right, right.
but it fit his motives and what he'd been doing at that point.
Mhm.
On October 2nd, 16-year-old Nancy Wilcox in Holiday, Utah, which was a suburb in Salt Lake City, was walking down a poorly lit main roadway where he parked his car before forcing her into an orchard. He then restrained her, put her into his vehicle, and drove back to his apartment where he kept her for 24 hours before deciding he had had enough of her. Nancy Wilcox's remains were also never found. On October 11th, 21-year-old University of Utah student Rhonda Stapley was waiting at a bus stop in Salt Lake City when she was approached by Bundy, who had pulled over and offered her a ride in his Beetle. After entering his vehicle, she noted that something seemed as if he just wanted to get to know her. They were conversating. It was like, "Hey, how long have you been studying here? What are you studying?" Things like that. It was normal conversation. As the drive continued, she noticed he wasn't going towards the university as he said he was. So she assumed he was trying to find somewhere secluded to make out with her. I mean, this was the 70s. They're both young adults. When he parked the vehicle, he shut off the engine. He turned to her and said, "Do you know what? I'm going to kill you now." He then repeatedly choked and raped Stapley over 3 hours until Bundy had thought she was dead and stepped out, to which Stapley took this opportunity and ran into the woods. What bugs me about that is a lot of people are actually debating if that was true or not.
Mhm.
Stapley actually ended up writing an entire book called I Survived Ted Bundy, and it's about this whole incident as well as through the years, because she didn't come out about this until 2011.
Right.
Um, and when she came out about this, a lot of people were like, "Oh, you're just trying to hop on the train." And she's like, "No, like this entire book is about how like that fucked me up for years." And there's still a lot of it that she isn't super okay with talking about.
Mhm.
And another person we mentioned in here, Anne Rule, actually
Mhm.
helped Stapley write the book. So that's super nice. Uh, Nice that she was able to write the book.
Right, right, right.
Clarifying. On October 18th, Melissa Ann Smith, a 17-year-old daughter of the police chief of Midvale, which is another Salt Lake City suburb, went to a pizza parlor to hang out with some friends. Around 9:30 p.m., she left to begin walking back home. However, her nude body was found in a nearby mountains area 9 days later. After examination, it was actually indicated that she may have been alive for up to 7 days following her disappearance.
Oh no.
On October 31st, Laura Ann Aim, 17-year-old, left a Halloween party by herself just after midnight. She was last seen trying to hitchhike away home, where she found a lovely man in a brown beetle to help her out. He knocked her unconscious and kept her for about 20 days before her nude body was found 9 miles northeast in the American Fork Canyon on Thanksgiving Day. Both Aim and Smith had been beaten, raped, sodomized, and strangled with nylon stockings. However, it was noted that their hair was relatively clean and remnants of makeup was found on both of them. Remember what I said about that hit to his ego and how that really messed him up? That's 3 murders with 1 attempted murder in a month. where he
Mm-hmm.
went from that one a month to
As
this.
many as he can.
Yeah, this is where he's realizing, like, I'm not smart. I don't have this. I need control in some way, shape, or form. And unfortunately, it came at the cost of these lovely young ladies. In late afternoon of November 8th, Bundy approached 18-year-old telephone operator Carol Durant at Fashion Place Mall in Murray, which was less than a mile from the Midvale restaurant where Smith was last seen. He identified himself as Officer Roseland of the Murray Police Department and told Durant that someone had attempted to break into her car. He asked her to accompany him to the station to file a complaint. When Durant pointed out to Bundy that he was driving on a road that did not lead to the police station, he immediately pulled onto the shoulder and attempted to handcuff her. Durant fought back, and while they both struggled, Bundy accidentally fastened both handcuffs to the same wrist. So Durant was able to open the car door and escape. Later that evening, Deborah Jean Kent, a 17-year-old student at Viewmont High School in Bountiful, which is about 20 miles north of Murray, was leaving a theater production at the high school to pick up her little brother. A man was in the parking lot asking students to help him identify a car. Kent went to help him, where she was never seen again. Bundy took her home as he did with the last two women he was able to abduct, where Kent was unalived before the day was over. In the same month, Klopfer had actually called King County Police a second time after reading that young women were disappearing in towns surrounding Salt Lake City. Detective Randy, and don't laugh at this, this is someone's last name. Detective Randy Hergensheimer of the Major Crimes Division interviewed her in detail. By then, Bundy had risen considerably on the King County's hierarchy of suspicion. However, the witnesses of the beach incidents were considered the most reliable, and they had failed to identify Bundy from a photo lineup.
Oh no.
In December, Klopfer called the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office and re-announced her suspicions. Bundy's name was added to their list of suspects, but at the time, there was really nothing to link him to the Utah killings. In January 1975, Bundy returned to Seattle after his final exams and spent a week with Klopfer, who did not tell him that she was secretly reporting him to the police.
Oh God.
She actually used this opportunity to make plans to visit him in Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
In 1975, Bundy shifted much of his criminal activity eastward to Colorado. On January 12th, a 23-year-old registered nurse named Karen Eileen Campbell was at a hotel in Snowmass Village where she left her partner to go get a magazine from her room to never return. Bundy had abducted her, hit her head repeatedly, and assaulted her. A month later, her nude body was found next to a dirt road just outside the resort. On March 15th, 100 miles north of Snowmass Village, Vail ski instructor Julie Lyle Cunningham, who was 26, was walking from her apartment to a dinner date with a friend when she was approached by a man on crutches asking her to help carry his ski boots to his car. Once she obliged, just to be polite, they got to his car where he clubbed and handcuffed her before sexually assaulting her and killing her. Weeks later, he made the 6-hour drive from Salt Lake City to visit her remains, which is fucking weird. All right, at this point, there is a clear pattern. He convinces women to help him and preys on the fact that this was a time period where people just had to be polite.
Mm-hmm.
Then he kidnaps, assaults, and unalives them before dumping their bodies miles away from where he found them. About a month later, on April 6th, 25-year-old Denise Lynn Oliverson was riding her bike to her parents' house. Her bike and sandals were found under a viaduct near a railroad bridge. It is unclear if her remains were ever found. On May 6th, Bundy parked outside the Alameda Junior High School in Pocatello, Idaho, which was 160 miles north of Salt Lake City. He lured 12-year-old Lynette Dawn Culver to his car where he spotted her walking alone. He brought her to a Holiday Inn where he raped and drowned Lynette in the bathtub. Just a couple of weeks later, Bundy's DES coworkers were visiting him in Salt Lake City and actually stayed with him for a week in his apartment. When they left, he made a trip to Seattle where he spent a week with Klopfer, where they discussed getting married the following Christmas. And this is just so tapped that he's doing these terrible things to women, and then he's like, "Oh, hey, by the way, do you want to get married?"
That literally what was going through my head as you were saying those words.
There's not even a shred of guilt or sympathy or anything. No remorse. Another big thing I do want to mention is the fact that he went these major distances, like 160 miles north, fucking 90 miles in one direction. Like, most of the time, you look at somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer, they stuck to one city, one general area. He was all over the place, which also made him harder to track down because it was such a, like, 160 miles. Gas prices back then, like, if he had today's like $3 a tank gas prices, fucking Bundy would not have been able to do half these murders.
No, he'd be like, "Yeah, I'm going down the street, and we're just gonna see what happens."
He would have been caught so much quicker. Not even just the fact that we have technological advances, just the fact that he wouldn't have been able to drive this much.
Exactly.
On June 28th, though, shortly after Bundy returned from his stay with his girlfriend, he found 15-year-old Susan Curtis, who was taken from campus of Brigham Young University in Provo, which was about 45 miles south of Salt Lake City. In August of 1975, Bundy, however, was baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
There ain't no way.
To which then he became quite the active participant in services, and everyone believed that he was following most church restrictions. At this time, though, Washington state investigators were still trying to look into the spree of killings that seemed to have just stopped in the Pacific Northwest. They went through list after list of the little details they had to narrow their suspect down to about 100 best options, and Bundy was on that list. Trying to chew bread at the speed of light. On August 16th of 1975, Bundy was spotted by Utah Highway Patrol Officer Bob Hayward in Granger driving around a residential area in the early morning, like the sun was still down, without any lights on. Once Bundy had noticed the patrol vehicle, he fled and a chase ensued. Once Bundy finally stopped, Officer Hayward had noticed that Bundy's front passenger seat had been removed and was placed in the rear seat. When he searched the car, he found a ski mask, a second mask made from pantyhose, a crowbar, handcuffs, trash bags, a coil of rope, an ice pick, and other suspicious items. Bundy explained the ski mask due to his love of skiing, and the other items were just common household items. However, Detective Jerry Thompson remembered the description of a suspect and car from the November 1974 Durant attempted kidnapping. In a search of Bundy's apartment, police found ski resort guide with a check mark by the same hotel where Campbell went missing, as well as a brochure for the Viewmont High School play where Kent had disappeared. However, though, this was not enough to detain Bundy. It was essentially circumstantial, so he was released.
Oh my fucking god.
And a little bit of an anecdote here. He told police later on, way later on, that if they had done a more thorough search, they would have found photos of his victims' bodies. Like, it is so wild how he gets so close to getting caught and then gets away with it. Salt Lake City police had placed Bundy on a 24-hour surveillance, and Thompson actually flew to Seattle with two other detectives to interview Klopfer. She told them that in the year prior to Bundy's move to the Midwest, she discovered objects that she couldn't understand in her house and in Bundy's apartment. These were things like crutches, a bag of plaster, a meat cleaver that was never actually used for cooking, surgical gloves, and a sack of women's clothing that did not belong to Klopfer.
Oh God.
Bundy hadn't worked in a while, so Klopfer explained that she was confused when Bundy would show up multiple times with a new TV or new stereo. And whenever she questioned him about where he got it, he warned her, "If you tell anyone, I'll break your fucking neck." She explained that Bundy would become very upset with her whenever she considered cutting her hair. Klopfer did help detectives realize that Bundy had not been with her during any of the disappearances of the Pacific Northwest victims. Shortly thereafter, Seattle homicide detective Kathy McChesney spoke to Klopfer and informed her of Edwards and her brief engagement to Bundy around Christmas of 1973. In September, Bundy sold his Beetle to a teenager. Utah police quickly impounded it, and FBI technicians dismantled to search it fully. They ended up finding hairs matching Campbell and eventually hair strands from Smith and DeRanche. This is where they realized that this wasn't a coincidence. On October 2nd, detectives put Bundy into a photo lineup. Before he was to appear for this, he actually was able to drive himself to this photo lineup, change his haircut, change where his part was, shave off his facial hair. However, with all that being done, it was here where DeRanche immediately, like no hesitation, identified him.
Okay, because I was just about to say, like, there's no why.
Also, why when you're bringing in somebody for a suspect that you let them change, like, why do you
Like,
not
why?
handcuff them and say, "Let's go, you're gonna come in for a lineup"? Like, why do you give him the opportunity to change how he looks?
Exactly. It's like, oh, it's like, all right, that's great, but do you mind if I go get a haircut, shave, maybe just grab a drink,
Like, again, this is one of the things that I will absolutely fault the police on, because what the hell were you thinking? Oh, hey, this guy might have to do with murders and kidnappings. Let's just let him change his haircut. It's stupid.
and give that man a warm towel while you're at it too. Like,
And
what
might as
the
well at this
fuck?
point. Um, so yeah, so he was immediately identified. Witnesses from Bountiful recognized him as well as the stranger near Viewmont High School. However, there wasn't enough to link him to Kent's disappearance, whose remains were never found at this point. But police had enough to charge him with aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault in the DeRanche case. This didn't last, however, as where he was put in jail, his parents then paid his $15,000 bail, and he waited for his trial while living back in Seattle with Klopfer. Seattle police at the time didn't have any evidence against him for any of their killings, but they kept him under close surveillance. In February of 1976, Bundy stood trial for the DeRanche kidnapping on the advice of his attorney, John O'Connell. He waived his right to a jury due to the negative publicity surrounding the case. After a 4-day bench trial and a weekend of deliberation, Judge Stuart Hanson Jr. found Bundy guilty of kidnapping and assault. In June, he was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in the Utah State Prison. In October, Bundy was found hiding in bushes in the prison yard carrying a quote-unquote escape kit, which was road maps, airline schedules, and a social security card, and he had spent several weeks in solitary confinement due to this.
Mm.
Later that month, Colorado authorities charged him with Campbell's murder. After a period of resistance, he waived extradition proceedings, and he was transferred to Aspen, Colorado in 1977. However, that's not where his story ends. All right, on June 7th, 1977, Bundy was transported 40 miles from the Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs to Putkin County Courthouse in Aspen, Colorado for preliminary hearing. As most men with an ego problem, Bundy had decided to serve as his own attorney, and as such, was excused by the
Yay.
judge from wearing handcuffs or leg shackles. During a recess, Bundy realized he wasn't fully equipped to actually represent himself. So he asked to visit the courthouse's law library so he could do some quick research regarding his case. Because you remember, he did not ever graduate or even finish his first year of law school. While he was skimming through the books in the law library, the guards were blocking the doorway, of course, to leave. Bundy walked over to a bookcase, and next to that bookcase, he saw an opened window that was out of view of the guards. So he jumped out of a second-story window onto the ground, injuring his right ankle. He threw away his top layer of clothes and limped his way towards the Aspen Mountains. He climbed all the way near the summit before breaking into a hunting cabin. He took this opportunity to steal food, clothing, and a rifle. The next day, Bundy left the cabin and toured the town of Crested Butte. Butte. I don't really know how to pronounce that. Butte. Butte. However, he was wary from all the traveling and the injury, so he did quickly become lost in the forest. For 2 days, he wandered the forest searching for a way out. On June 10th, he broke into a camping trailer that was on Maroon Lake, which was 10 miles south of Aspen, taking food and a ski parka. 3 days after that, he stole a car on the edge of an Aspen golf course. After spending 6 whole days, cold, sleep deprived, and still injured, he drove back to Aspen, where 2 police officers noticed his car weaving in and out of its lane and pulled him over. In the car were maps of the mountain area that were used to demonstrate the location of Campbell's body, which he only even had access to this because he was becoming his own lawyer. He had a right to look at the discovery, which is the evidence.
Right.
This helped prove that his escape had been planned. This also goes into his fucking ego, though, because you escape prison, you escape jail, and then you go back to the town that you escaped from? Like, they're just not gonna look for you? He ends up back in jail in Glenwood Springs. Bundy ignored the advice of legal advisors to just stay put. The case was against him, which was actually rather weak. All of the evidence was deteriorating pretty quick as pretrial motions consistently were being resolved in his favor, and majority of the evidence was ruled inadmissible. He only had about another year and a half to finish serving on the DeRanche conviction. However, this wasn't good enough for Bundy. In late 1977, Bundy filed for a motion for a change of venue to Denver, Colorado. On December 23rd, the Aspen trial judge granted but to Colorado Springs instead of Denver, where juries were notoriously more hostile to murder suspects. While serving in the Glenwood jail, he had saved up about $500 in cash. On New Year's Eve, most of the guards were actually home on Christmas break, and nonviolent prisoners were on furlough with their families. Bundy spent most of the holidays alone, where he was able to lose about 35 pounds. He was also an avid reader, always requesting new books for his cell. He realized the books were almost amazing at simulating him sleeping. His lost weight was just enough for him to be able to fit into a hole that was in his cell ceiling. Now, some sources say the hole was from a light fixture that was missing that was supposed to be replaced, but due to the holidays, it was delayed. Other sources say that he slowly sawed the hole into his ceiling. Regardless, he placed all the books to simulate him sleeping in his bunk. He wiggled through the hole and explored through the crawl space above, where he crawled his way to the ceiling of an apartment for the chief jailer. He broke his way in, changed into the street clothes from the jailer's closet, and walked right out the front door.
You have got to be kidding me.
After stealing a car, Bundy was done with the Midwest and even the West altogether. He went east, but the car broke down in the mountains on I-70. A passing motorist actually ended up giving him a ride to Vail, which was 60 miles from Glenwood Springs. There, he caught a bus to Denver, where he got himself on the first flight in the morning to Chicago. It wasn't until Bundy was already in Chicago did the Glenwood Spring Jail's skeleton crew notice that he had escaped, which wasn't until about 17 hours after the escape. From Chicago, Bundy made his way by train to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where he hung out for 5 days until he stole a car to drive to Atlanta, where he got on a bus to Tallahassee, Florida. On the morning of January 8th is when he arrived in Tallahassee. He stayed for one night at a hotel before he rented a room under the alias Chris Hagen. He ended up staying at a boarding house near the Florida State University campus, or FSU. Without any real identification to get a job, Bundy reverted back to the ways of shoplifting and stealing credit cards from wallets of women left in shopping carts at local grocery stores. While it may seem like he truly had a master plan, he was losing control of the entire court situation, which just enraged him. He could not be put back in a position where he didn't hold the power. It was like a rabid dog or rabid animal just being backed into a corner. And that is where it leads us to the early morning hours of January 15th, 1978, which was 1 week after his arrival in Tallahassee. Bundy entered SFU's Chi Omega sorority house through a rear door with a faulty locking mechanism. At about 2:45 a.m., he entered the room of Margaret Elizabeth Bowman, who was 21, and with a piece of oak firewood in hand, he bludgeoned her as she slept, then strangled her with nylon stockings. He then entered the room of 20-year-old Lisa Janet Levy and beat her unconscious, strangled her. He sexually assaulted her with a hair mist bottle while biting her buttocks very deeply and even biting off one of her nipples. In an adjoining room, he attacked Kathy Kleiner, who was 21, breaking her jaw and deeply lacerating her shoulder. And lastly, Karen Chandler, who was 21. She suffered concussion, broken jaw, loss of teeth, and a crushed finger. Chandler and Kleiner survived the attack. The girls actually believe that the only reason why they survived this horrific attack was due to a car's headlights lighting up the room they were in. After leaving the sorority house, Bundy broke into a basement apartment 8 blocks away, then attacked 21-year-old FSU student Cheryl Thomas, dislocating her shoulder and fracturing her jaw and skull in 5 places. She was left with permanent deafness in her left ear and equilibrium damage that ended her dancing career. On Thomas's bed, police found a pantyhose quote-unquote mask containing hairs which were similar to Bundy's. On February 8th, Bundy drove 150 miles to Jacksonville in a stolen SFU van. He approached a 14-year-old Leslie Parmenter where he tried to say he was part of the fire department until Leslie's brother confronted him and started yelling at him, so Bundy backtracked 60 miles to Lake City. At Lake City Junior High School the following morning, 12-year-old Kimberly Diane Leach was asked to go get her teacher's forgotten purse. 7 weeks later, her partially mummified remains were found in a pig shed near the Suwannee River State Park, which was 35 miles northwest of Lake City. It was found that she had been raped before having her throat cut and her genitals mutilated with a knife.
Jesus.
And then on February 12th, Bundy had no cash to pay his rent, and he was convinced police were on his tail. So he stole a car and fled Tallahassee across the Florida Panhandle. 3 days later, around 1 a.m., Pensacola police officer David Lee stopped Bundy near the Alabama line. Officer Lee realized the vehicle was stolen and went to arrest Bundy when Bundy kicked Officer Lee's legs out from under him and booked it. Lee fired 2 warning shots before chasing Bundy down and tackling him. The two struggled as Officer Lee tried to restrain Bundy, and Bundy himself was trying to get the officer's gun. Officer Lee quickly got handcuffs on Bundy and officially arrested him. In the stolen car were 3 sets of IDs belonging to female SFU students, 21 stolen credit cards, and a stolen TV set. Lee brought Bundy to jail, still unaware who he actually had in the back of his squad car. As they were driving to jail, Officer Lee heard Bundy say, "I wish you had just killed me." Alright, so now it's time for my favorite part of the video where I get to tell you guys all about the wonderful thing I have built for you today. So what I have built is I built a replica of the Chi Omega sorority house. You can use this as university housing in The Sims if you'd like. It can fit up to 8 Sims. There's 8 bedrooms. I think there's 4 bathrooms. Miley1995 actually helped me out quite a lot with this one, as she's in a sorority, so I was trying to get her feedback, and I think this looks pretty cute. It's got lots of opportunity for activities and skills building and lots of study areas, so it's really cute. You can find this on my gallery under IvyIsADino, same thing as my username, and it will be typed out in the description in case you don't know how to spell it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next time.